Auzubillahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is Ghazala Amin with PRM700, the Advanced Project Management course for your MSPM degree program. Last week we talked about, actually the last couple of lectures, we talked about the employment opportunities within the project management programs, different methodologies that are available, different associations that have come up, and actually they're doing a lot of good work, most of it voluntary, and some of it obviously it's in for making money also. There are certification courses, PMI taking lead in it by their PMP course. Then there is Prince 2, there's APM, and there are several more. Everyone has kind of joined in the same bandwagon. Media has also contributed to it. There are documentaries and several of them that are out there. The movie industry has kind of jumped in also. By representing mega projects, by representing the techniques and the motivation and the conflict resolution situations of project management, those being the key areas that a project manager has to focus on during the entire project life cycle. The team building, the motivation, working with the given resources, making the most of it, and ultimately there is one goal of having an effective and efficient implementation of all processes. If we talk about the PMBOK, the Project Management Body of Knowledge from PMI, currently they have 9 knowledge areas. Within those 9 knowledge areas, there are 42 processes. The 5th edition that is out there and should be coming and should be getting released fairly soon, they are adding another knowledge area to it. The stakeholder management, customer management and the stakeholder management has a centerfold, a center importance. And it is extremely important to manage that relationship well. One of the MCQs that I shared with you a couple of weeks ago was making sure that your customer and your sponsors are contributing to your project appropriately and frequently. There is no given rule that they should contribute a 10% or 20% to your project or any number. There is no statistics. Whenever you need them, they should be available to help you out. The definition of a sponsor, the right definition of a sponsor, is to push your project in the right direction and making sure that the success of your project as a project manager is also their prime priority. So not just putting in finances, not just adding or contributing their presence in your meetings, it is their prime priority to make sure that your project meets its goal. The 3 triple constraints: making sure the scope and the requirements are met, making sure the time schedule is met, making sure the money is used appropriately. Whenever there is a change in the project, those sponsors need to approve those changes to ensure that they are beneficial to your project. Remember, project manager and your project management team is responsible for execution. They may not understand the bigger picture of the project. The sponsors and your project organization should have that vision, should be the visionaries in your project, and they should know the bigger picture of where that project will fit in, and they need to explain that to you and your project team appropriately also. Bottom line is that the visionary and the execution part should match, and the project should be beneficial. The end users in this aspect will come in and should gain the most benefit after the implementation of your project. Whether it's the social sector it's the corporate sector or the governmental sector or the Department of Defense or the NASA, whatever organization, in that little list of manufacturing plants at the bottom and NASA and Department of Defense at the top, whatever the industry is, whenever you implement a project, there has to be a beneficial reason for its implementation. And these things need to be very clear in not just the project sponsor's head, but your own head also as a project manager, and subsequently you need to share that information with your project team. And the reason why it's so important is that we all need to understand the reason of implementation. Why is it so important for me to skip my family dinner or my family reunion or my brother's wedding to ensure that that project report is on time? These are the questions and these are the debates that all of your team members would have to deal with during the project life cycle. So the priorities of actually meeting those triple constraints, meeting those goals that you as a project manager along with your sponsors have identified as milestones need to be clear in everybody's head, that those responsibilities need to be tackled and those timelines need to be met. With that, as a summary of everything that we've talked about, let's move on. We will be talking about a very important phase. The 5 phases in a project life cycle. The project initiation phase, the project planning phase, moving into the execution, along with monitoring and control, and last phase is the project closure phase. Project planning phase for a project manager is of most importance. I will continue to use the word most important for every phase, because the reasons behind every phase are as important to the project manager and should be made same importance to every other team member and also the sponsors. So the importance should be shared of every phase of your project. Project management processes. PM processes are again divided into 5 phases or process group. We are moving into the second phase of the project life cycle, which is the planning phase. Project management framework and integration. 60% of a project manager's time in a project life cycle should be spent working in the project planning phase. Why so much? It's half of your time. Shouldn't you as a project manager be spending more time within the project execution phase? No. If you have spent enough time in the project planning phase to accurately define and document processes and templates within the right and appropriate phase of the project life cycle, then your project execution will be seamless. Responsibilities and accountabilities will be delegated to the appropriate team members. If the project planning process is done well, the project manager should spend appropriate time in the project planning phase to ensure that all processes are documented and templates are produced, to ensure that none of those templates and processes need to be created in the execution phase. You should be able to take those templates and processes and delegate it to the right appropriate team member. Within the execution, your responsibility as a project manager is to oversee other people's work. Your responsibility should only be as a support mode, rather than getting into and doing micromanagement of the processes. So if you look at this picture, within the process groups, we've covered the project initiation phase, we are working on the project planning phase, and then Within the project planning phase, if you look at two bubbles that are of most importance within the planning phase are the WBS, which is the work breakdown structure, and the project scheduling, which is estimating time. How long will it take for me and my team members to do certain tasks? The change and risk management will continue on from the project initiation phase and then moving on, taking center stage in the project planning phase, and then continuing on in the execution, control monitoring, and then the closeout phase also. The contract and customer relationship management also starts with the project initiation phase and continues to move on, but will continue to exist during all the 5 phases of the project life cycle. The upper bubble, the team development and management of project human resources, also continue from the initiation phase to the closeout phase. Let's look at the project planning phase. Planning has the most processes. In 4th edition PMBOK, out of the 42 processes, the 20 processes let's do a quick count of it, starting from the development of project plan and then moving on to the plan risk responses. The 20 processes are only within the project planning phase. So why so much emphasis in the planning phase? The reason for emphasis is pretty clear. If you plan things well, then your execution and your monitoring control phase will be seamless. People will know what to do, and your resources will continue to operate effectively and efficiently throughout the life of the project, and you are left to manage only the petty issues and manage human resources, resolve conflicts. You will have time for team building skills. You will have time to motivate your resources, your human resources. You will have time to spend effective and efficient time with your sponsors. You will have time to monitor your project pretty well, produce status reports on timely basis, and follow your communication plan. That should also have been developed in the planning phase. So project planning. The purpose of project planning is to do 2 things: establish and maintain plans that define your project activities. Majority of project managers' time is spent to effectively plan the project activities. So 2 things we are doing. We are establishing and we are also maintaining our plans that defines the project activities. It is the time, if well spent by the project manager. A project manager should be able to predict, at least on paper, how things will be happening on a day-to-day basis. So if you're a project manager who spent good time on project planning and is very comfortable with the outcome of the activities during the planning phase, you can easily close your eyes and predict that on July 21st, during the closure phase, I will book a particular restaurant to have lunch as a team closure meeting. That is the level of project planning that needs to take place in a well-defined project. Yes, there will be changes. Yes, there will be issues. Yes, there will be risks. Some identified, some unidentified. but those can be tackled easily if you, as a project manager, have spent your time planning those issues and you have created a buffer within your project plan to take care and tackle those issues, changes, and risks. The buffer should not always be taken for granted. The buffer amount and the buffer time should always be shared with the customer and your own project organization. So, we talked a lot about when project planning and why you should do a lot of planning for a project to ensure its timely delivery. Let's talk about some issues that arise when you do not plan well for your project. So when project planning is not done well, and this is reference from Carnegie Mellon University, an introduction to CMMI. So it's not just me and some other project management teachers or instructors are saying. This is a well-established fact written by a lot of very reputable institutes and organizations. So, couple of slides, let's spend time on when you do not plan well, what happens then? Poor estimates lead to cost and schedule overruns. So then we were going to talk about what happens when you do not plan your time. Obviously there will be holes and gaps in your project plan, your activities, your estimates. You estimated 5 days because that was spur of the moment decision on your part, along with maybe a consultant or a subject matter expert. You did not spend enough time going through all the activities and understanding how long will it take to perform some of that work. So, poor estimates obviously will lead to schedule and cost overrun, because schedule and cost are going on simultaneously. Inability to discover deviations from undocumented plan. If you have not documented plans, then how will you define variations? Let's introduce you to two words: schedule performance index and cost performance index. These are schedule and cost variances. These are terminologies that are used in earned values. So, these variances are planned versus actual. If we haven't planned our activities well, then how will you be documenting or comparing your actual work? The customer, when you cannot describe and define those variances, the customer will start feeling that you are not understanding the needs of the project, or the project priorities are not completely understood by not just you, but your project organization also. Resources are not available or applied when needed. Obviously, if the planning is not done well, you cannot estimate absolutely when a particular resource should be brought in, and that resource also does not have an understanding of when he or she will be leveled out of the project or put on other tasks. So at that point in time, if the resources don't understand the dependency of time and cost to their little task, then you are actually extending the time that that particular resource will take to do or execute that particular task. Inability to meet commitments. Obviously, lack of planning, lack of documented time for start and end of tasks also puts you in a situation where you are unable to meet commitments. Commitments that were on your project charter in your project initiation phase, signed between not just you and the customer but also your project organization, reflecting badly on your contribution as a project manager. So when project planning is not done well, there is a good situation that your project may fail because of lack of planning. All these bullets of why or what will happen if you don't plan well, and why should we care? Why should we care as project management gurus, or why should we care as project managers or trainee project managers or coordinators? There's a bigger picture to it. It's not just on the individual basis. There's a bigger picture, because now it's your project organization, yourself, and your team that are on stake. Why should we care? Because customers don't trust suppliers who waste their resources. That is loss of future business. You got that project one time, but the probability of that customer giving you or assigning you and your organization to the next upcoming project would be very minimum. No lessons learned for future project means making the same mistake on multiple projects. So if you don't have the variances, if you don't have anything planned, you're not tracking your actuals, you're doing things on spur of the moment kind of activities, you're doing it as it comes along, then you are not comparing, you don't have any baseline to compare your actual work. And when your documentation is weak, from A project to B project to C project, there's no comparison of what is happening, which will result in no lessons learned for future project, meaning obviously making the same mistake over and over again if you're not understanding the value of planning things well and documenting things well. Ultimately, unhappy customers, employees, stockholders, not just the stakeholders, these are your company stockholders, and all leading to very short life for the business. You in this profession, your project organization in this profession. And ultimately the golden quote, if you fail to plan, then you are planning to fail. Over the lectures that I've already delivered and over the several lectures that we will be delivering as part of this PRM700 course, a lot will be said on the basis of PMI and what PMBOK has to say. One thing that I think I've already made clear to you and will like to reiterate is that no matter what methodology we use, no matter what source we use for PM information, the ultimate result is the same. We all talk the same thing. The underlying theme for all this work is the same. So let's move on to a little bit something a little different. Within the IT industry, CMMI, Capability Maturity Model, has a very important place. And the Carnegie Mellon University, for their project planning goals, have some very simple rules or steps. Let's look at some of those. The Carnegie Mellon University comes up with 3 goals for project planning, 3 steps. First one, establishing estimates. So you as a project manager, as a first step within the project planning phase, will need to sit down with whoever the resource is available at that point in time, some consultants, some subject matter expert, some technical gurus, some project team members that you have acquired within the planning phase. Remember, you are in the planning phase. In the project life cycle, you have only minimal resources to your disposal. So the first one that we are taking on is establishing estimates. And what are those estimates? These are estimates of project planning parameters that are established and maintained. Next, second step is developing a project plan. A project plan is established and maintained. Remember the definition of project plan? Establishing and maintaining. So now, as a second step within the Carnegie Mellon given steps, develop a project plan. A project plan is established and maintained as basis for managing your project. I also talked about variances, planned versus the actual happening. So at this point in time, you're creating your project plan, and during the execution and the monitoring control phase, you will get the actuals where you can actually compare these two results and see the deviations or the variations between the planning phase and the actual happening. The third step is obtaining commitment to the plan. Commitment from relevant stakeholders are established and maintained. Look at the similarity of words that are being used across methodologies. Establishing and maintaining. Planned versus actual. All these words are consistent in its application, and the reason is that no matter what methodology, no matter what book, no matter what parameter, no matter what organization that you end up working for or are working or are associated with, the parameters stay the same. We are doing the same work in every phase. The lingo may be different. So let's look at the chronological order of some of these steps. The first one would be your establishing estimates. Planning data will be put in, extracted. So you will bring all the team members. You will list out the activities A to Z. What will it require to ultimately take the project from the initiation to the closure phase? All of the planning data, whether it is from relevant projects that you have taken on or your organization have undertaken, information that is provided in the charter document from the customer, information from consultants, information from subject matter experts, information from the project team members. All that goes in to estimate how long will it take to do certain activities, plus more. From that point onwards, understanding the priority of the project, of how long the project will take, you will move on to creating a project plan. At that point in time, I would like to ensure that you understand that project plan is not just a Microsoft project plan, a software that we all use to estimate and track projects. The list of activities is provided. Project plan is not just that list of activities. Project plan is all the planning, all the documents that will come up in this phase. Contributions from project manager, team, project organization, stakeholders, customer, sponsors, let's think of other people who will be contributing, the subject matter experts, the consultants, all go in and we create this little group of documentation called a project plan. At this point in time, you will develop a project plan. All that project planning will move into an area that will be used during your project monitoring and control phase. So the PMNC is your project monitoring and control phase. Once you have created a project plan or group of documents that constitute the project plan, you need to get commitment to the plan. And the commitment comes in from every group that I just mentioned. Your project organization, your project sponsors, the upward communication, remember? The downward communication, which will be your own project team members committing to the plan, saying, yes, I feel accountable, yes, I will get the work done. Then your lateral communication peers, the line managers, the groups, the vendors, the subcontractors. So all of those relevant stakeholders will commit to your project plan and ensure that yes, it's our priority to contribute to the success of your project. Not just the sponsors, not just you, but entire group of relevant stakeholders, the upward communication, downward communication, and the lateral communication will all pitch in to contribute to the success of your project plan and your project ultimately. So these are happy stakeholders. The first step, establishing of estimates. Estimating your project scope. What is exactly the requirement for delivery? What is exactly the requirement for this project or the product? It feeds into determining the estimate of effort and cost that goes in to deliver the initial project scope or the product scope. Another bubble that is leading to determination of that estimate is establishing estimate of the work, product, and tasks. So you take this group of activities, you break it down into certain levels, and you start estimating how long will it take for individual tasks. And then defining your project life cycle. Ultimately, how long will it take for me to deliver this? How will I break it down? Who will be pitching in? All that is going on in the mind of the project manager. All this from the different pieces of information that you've collected. So the planning data is going back and forth into this little box. So establishing estimate is taken care of. We are moving on to development of the project plan. Now a lot is going on. A project plan, think of a project plan as a folder. A hard copy folder with several tabs in it, or a folder on your desktop with multiple folders underneath it. Each of the documents require a lot of effort and work from different stakeholders and different team members. But think of it. This is this big folder with multiple tasks underneath it. And each of those tasks require us to think, plan, and come up with a template document. So, first one could be, and what I have listed out here could have many more, but these are the main bubbles. Establishing the budget and schedule. So you group the activities and you start thinking of how long will it take for me to do each one of those tasks, and then the sum of it, the total schedule, and the budget, the manpower hours, resources, cost, and other things. Another folder within the project plan, big folder, another tab will be identifying your project risks. At this point in time, you would like to identify things that could go wrong with your project, that may hamper the end result or will pull you back from delivering your project deliverables on time, on budget, on schedule. So, identifying your project risks. Think of all things that can go wrong. You can, other than the technology, other than your own project resources, other than the money not coming in, other than the stakeholders not contributing appropriately, think of risks that can hurt your project. Security risks, load shedding, utility not getting to you at the right moment in time. On a bigger scale, earthquakes, untoward incidents, natural calamities. What do you do then? Are you going to think of some of the disaster recovery plans at this point in time? How important, how critical is this project? If it is an IT project, do you need to back up your data and store it in 2 different locations, 2 different geographical locations? If you have to contain it within Pakistan, then maybe the data needs to be backed up every Tuesday or every Wednesday, and CDs need to be burned and maybe stored in Karachi if the work is in Islamabad, or if the work is getting done in Karachi, then the work needs to be stored in Islamabad. Vice versa, if it is important enough and if it's a geographical project crossing the boundaries, then maybe 2 different countries. So all those project risks need to be identified at a very high level in the initial phases, and then you continue to look at it and you monitor them. More will follow in the project risk management lectures. Then you plan for project resources. How long, how many, what kind of skill set, when, how, what for the resources. Do I need all A-class resources, or should I start off with maybe 2 and then provide mentoring and coaching to some of the other ones so that they can be brought up to speed in a fairly faster manner to make sure the project doesn't get hurt? Plan for data management, plan for needed knowledge and skills, training skills. Do I need to send somebody for a week to get trained on a particular programming skill if it's an IT product? All these bubbles, look at it where they're initiating and all going into establishing your project plan. An important one which I just forgot to discuss is the planning your stakeholder involvement. How frequently am I going to meet with them? That's important. Communication management plan. Every first Monday at 3 p.m. there will be a sponsor meeting, and I need to make sure that I have the month status report available and sent to them through email the Friday before the meeting, so they have time to read it and understand it. And it's a standing meeting, so it's the first Monday of every month at 3 p.m. If Monday happens to be a holiday, then it will be on Wednesday of the same week. all those will be planned and signed, so you don't need to pick up your phone and call people and invite them every month, every week. And that's the beauty of planning. If you plan things well, then you have a knowledgeable group of stakeholders. So the very important bubble, and don't get overwhelmed by the information that you're receiving right now. Each one of these knowledge areas, for example, the project risk will be discussed, planning your stakeholder involvement, we'll discuss that in the communication management presentations. So we will continue to talk about the same things. Ultimately, you will be saying the same lingo, you will be saying the same things that I am saying during this lecture. All this comes out, all the planning data up on your left-hand corner will contribute with all these bubbles and ultimately delivers something called a project plan. So now we have an understanding that project plan is not just one listing of activities with some estimates of schedule and resources. But a project plan is a formal approved document used to manage and control project execution. Let's summarize for a moment. What was the definition of a project charter? Project charter was the initial document that gives authority to the project manager to allocate resources and to move ahead with the project. That was a tangible document for the initiation phase. In the project planning phase, we have the project plan. And project plan is not one document, but it is a group of several documents planned and documented and ready for the monitoring and control or the execution phase. Okay? So the formal approved document, remember all tangible documents at the end of the phase needs a signature from the project sponsors. That sign off allows the project manager to move to the next phase of the project. Let's look at what is italicized and then we will move on. The above documents need to be in place to be ready to execute, manage, and track your project performance. And how do you track your project performance? Based on the planned versus the actual. Your project plan includes your project charter, the initial document, your WBS, it's the work breakdown structure. And what are we using WBS? For task and resource assignment. Major milestone and baseline target delivery dates. Milestones are zero duration tasks. These are like placeholders, reason or task to celebrate. That means all the preceding activities are completed. उससे पहले की जितनी भी activities हैं, we are all done with that. And now, this is the major activity that says, yes, we have completed all the preceding activities and it's reason to celebrate because we have achieved a target within our project life cycle. And multiple targets or multiple milestones should be identified and documented as part of your project plan in consensus between the project organization, project sponsors, and the customers. Project communication plan. The responsibility assignment matrix, RAM. The risk management document. Your issues management document. The change management document. Milestone chart, again being a very important aspect of it. These are the identified celebration tasks with consensus between, again, what I've said, between the project organization, your sponsors, and your project team members, and your yourself as project manager. Then your status plan template, all agreed, shared and signed off between your project customer and yourself. The quality assurance document and the lessons learned. There are plenty more documents that could be part of your project plan, and these are only some of them, but these are some of the more relevant documents. Moving on to development. After the development of a project plan, let's look at obtaining commitment to the plan. So we have it all documented, we have all of the templates ready and shared between the different stakeholders. Now it's time for them to commit and say, yes, I agree, I'm in agreement, and this is how we will follow the plan towards ultimate success of the project. So all of the documents are shared, and now what are we doing? We are reviewing plans that affect our project. We are reconciling work and resource level. Obviously, no customer would agree and no project organization would be in total agreement with whatever you have put together in the first phase in the project plan. There will be modifications, there will be changes, there will be additional requests. All that work is still going on in the project planning phase. If you as project manager had been allocated enough time to actually get the work done. So all those changes, all those modifications, all those requests, all those reviews will ultimately lead to a common consensus of relevant and happy stakeholders. This takes time. Putting it all together, getting the approvals and the confirmations take a lot of time. And that is why, if you remember, I said 60% of a time, and you must have wondered, if I spend all the time planning, when will I really do the work? Well, now it all makes sense. If you have done your rounds, if you have confirmed work with the project stakeholders, if everybody was involved at the right time, at the right level, then think about it. Your execution and all the monitoring and controlling activities should again be fairly seamless. Relevant stakeholders has one important authoritative role, and that is the sponsor. The first thing that comes to our head when we hear the word sponsor is the organization or the role that provides money to the project or provide the finances to actually initiate and get the project going. Let's clarify that understanding. And let's look at what the books are saying about the definition of the sponsor. And from this point onwards, you will use this definition every time you hear the word sponsor. An individual or an organization who has the authority to perform, delegate, or ensure completion of the following project commitments. Number 1, formalization of an agreement with the project delivery organization. So remember the first step, the charter. Who signs it? Who gives the project manager that ultimate authority to start going out and allocating resources to their project? It's the sponsor. And this, the first bullet, is actually talking about the charter. Next one is the approval to proceed with the start of the project or of a project phase. Start of the project is obviously the charter, project charter. However, remember one important thing, that every phase requires a sign-off to move on to the next phase of the project. We, in our practical project management lifestyle, we tend to ignore that from planning to execution and monitoring. However, that should not be the case if you're looking at a storybook format of how projects should be run and the ideal scenario. Every phase of the project needs a sign-off, and project manager never has that authority. And you know why the project manager never has the authority to move from one phase to another? Is because the project manager may hurry up, may ignore some of the processes, hide some of the flaws of the project. So the project sponsor is the ideal and most relevant group or organization or a person that can allow the project manager and the project organization to proceed to the next phase of the project. And the project sponsor at that point in time always asks and looks for a tangible piece of document listing all the activities that took place within that phase of the project. Next one, spending for the cost or price of the project as specified in the agreement. This is one of the bullets that we assume is the only bullet for project sponsor's definition, is providing the finances or approving or authorizing the money movement from the customer to the project organization. The sponsor may be internal or external to the project delivery team's organization. You could have a team, the project management office, being your sponsor. You could have an outside customer as your sponsor. You can have auditors or third-party consultants that your customer has brought in to oversee seamless execution of your project. They could also be having the role of the sponsor. That means having the signing capability to make sure your project meets its target delivery requirements. So all these definitions of sponsors, the main idea of having a sponsor or the main definition of a sponsor is a person, a group or organization that on its priority goals has a main objective of pushing and making sure that and ensuring your project's success and ensuring that your project meets the triple constraints, meets the scope, the requirements, on time and on budget. The sponsor also, on its group of priorities, also is going to make sure that all changes that are taking place to the initial scope and requirement statement are ultimately beneficial not to just your project but to the organization that they're representing. And any changes that will not be beneficial to the project are eliminated during the change control board meeting. During the planning phase, an important document also comes out along with a lot of documents, is the sponsor agreement management. Sooner we get that in place, better off your life as a project manager will be. And again, safety and security, not just to your project organization, but to your own project team members also. Sponsor agreement management should come up in the sponsor agreement manager should come up in the planning phase of the project. The processes that are necessary to build your agreement or to document your agreement are presenting it to the sponsor, negotiating the changes, and at the end of the project or phase, close out the agreement. So sponsor agreement management are the processes necessary to build the agreement by presenting it to the sponsor, negotiating the changes, and at the end of the project or phase, close out the agreement. So that document saying these are the rules that I need to abide by as a sponsor, and these are the rules and regulations that are required by the project organization to ensure the timely delivery of my project and meeting all the goals and objectives in a certain ethical and professional manner. Both those rules and regulations are set up and signed by the subsequent stakeholders, not just the sponsor, but the project relationship between the sponsor and the project organization and the project manager, if he or she is available at that point in time. Remember, the sponsor agreement management is the level set of code of conduct between the sponsor and the project organization. And the project organization's role and responsibility trickles down to the project manager and then down to the project team member. Phase end reviews should be used to help the sponsor determine if the project should continue to the next phase or not. Project planning. More we talk about project planning, clearer some of these things in our head. The purpose of good project planning is to ensure that all detailed plans for managing the project are defined, formal commitments are established, and the team is ready to execute. Effective project planning equals readiness for performance. The purpose of good project planning is to do certain things, to ensure that we have all of the tasks, all of the documents ready and out there, committed between the sponsors, the relevant stakeholders, the project managers. And based on all that mutual understanding and cooperation, your team will start their execution phase. Effective project planning equals readiness for performance. More time you spend planning, you are creating grounds for success for your project team. So project planning checkpoint. As a project manager, we have to do a lot of things. Think of that particular person with a lot of eggs that he or she is juggling. And every time you drop an egg, at this point in time, it will not be very messy, but you will see the mess later on in the execution phase. That means anything that you oversee or you choose to ignore in the planning phase, you will have to pay the price of it during the execution and the monitoring phase. So, with that mindset, you are doing several things. As a project manager, you must validate financial commitment to the business, right? Money being very important, giving that comfort level to the sponsor to ensure that timely release of money is coming your way, or the finances. Set expectation with the client and the project sponsor. You have to be in a position to provide that comfort level that yes, I know what I'm doing and we will get your project done right based on your requirements to meet and exceed your expectation. You as a project manager should also recognize that once signatures are procured, once your project sponsor, based on all the definitions that I just shared with you, signs that document, and your project organization, when they sign that document, they're putting trust on what they're signing. And they are assuming that those dates, those commitments, those high-level task breakdowns have taken enough of your time and effort that you feel comfortable in meeting those targets. And subsequently, they have the comfort level, or they have set an expectation that their requirements will be met. So once those signatures are procured, there's no turning back. Your objective for this project at that point in time is to meet those target goals. And it's just not you as a project manager, but it is also your own project team. They need to have the same level of expectation that come hail or storm, no matter what happens, the accountability for them and the responsibility handed over to them needs to be met. So, if a report needs to be submitted on Friday by 5 p.m., starting Thursday, they need to understand that the commitment at the deadline needs to be met. If they have to let go sleeping for that particular night, they need to do that, and they need to make that adjustment, because those commitments are set in stone. That is a passion, that is the need that all project managers and their team members need to set for themselves. Have your project team committed to the plan. During the WBS conversation, the work breakdown structure conversation, we'll talk about some of those things. But during the planning phase, if you've put down a task, if you've put down hours next to the task and the cost associated with the task, those tasks, those commitments need to be met. Be ready to be accountable for the project execution. So if you have the responsibility, you need to develop and nurture that accountability environment also, where each individual project team member is accountable for delivering their commitment. Project planning is a crucial point in the project life cycle. When you decide, and who's the you? It's the project manager and the project organization's decision, that the project is ready to commit to future execution tasks. Once that signature is procured, I will repeat myself, there's no going back. The comfort level of being on the drawing board is taken away, and then it's moving time, where whatever you have worked on, whatever you have decided, whatever estimates that you provided, and you being not just you as a project manager, your project team and your project organization, that you and your team and your organization is accountable for meeting those targets. If simply we look at how many projects fail and how many are troubled projects, that accountability, well, there could be many multiple reasons why a project may fail or be troubled, but most of the time it's the mindset of the project team or the project manager or the project organization of what world will not fall apart if we don't meet these target goals. If you have that attitude and if you have that mindset, then you're lacking, seriously lacking the passion that is demanded out of the project management profession. How does an estimate become a budget? Couple of things. If estimate is so important, and we are saying that all this talk about once a signature is obtained, then no turning back, and it's all the scary factors that are actually given out as a part of the previous slide, saying if you say it, you have to meet it, and all the target dates. Well, so you're estimating something. At this point in time in the project life cycle, you have minimal resources to work with, so you acquire the services of anyone that you can get hold of to ensure that the estimating process or the estimating numbers are fairly accurate. Remember that for an estimate to become a budget, that means set in stone kind of deadlines. You have to go through a certain process. You have to validate your estimate with the project team. So you have put together activity number A, activity number B, activity number C, and review your assumptions, your hours, your risks. So, along with just saying it will take 5 hours, think of other probabilities and possibilities. My resources that will be brought in to do this particular task needs to be trained. There's a learning curve involved with it. They would have to do. What about the risks? What about if it's taking a week? What if there's a national holiday that falls in between? Or the unexpected risks, security concerns. Have you applied a certain percentage to that estimate? So this would be a time with a clear level head deciding, is this accurate? If you predicted 50 hours to do a certain task, thinking of all those things, should I bump it up to 60 hours? Validate your estimate with the sponsors, the financial executive, the quality assurance team, and other people. Remember that relevant stakeholders and the business commitment, that's the portion of it where everybody, not just your own team members, but your relevant stakeholders are also very comfortable with those numbers. When you talk to your sponsors, your financial executives, your quality assurance team, the subject matter experts, or the consultants, or people who have actually done similar tasks, they will put in the business rationale. They will think of timings and cost estimates. They will also think of cost buffers or contingency reserves. We'll talk about the contingency reserve and the management reserve within the risk management plan. The profit contribution. So in its entirety, not just individual tasks. Your sponsors and some of these people that I've mentioned will look at the bigger picture, the total cost, the total time duration of the project. And if needed, they will drill down to individual tasks. Once everybody is comfortable and feeling accountable for meeting those targets, your team will be doing the work, the finance groups, the sponsors, the customers, and your project organization. They're feeling good about the estimates and the numbers. At this point in time, you will baseline the budget. I've heard different definitions of baselining. The simplest definition of baselining the budget means once everybody is in agreement, it's like setting those numbers in stone or taking a snapshot of it. Printing it, signing it, this is your baseline. If you use a software tool, for example, Microsoft Project, At that point in time, you will press that button and it baselines it. From that point onwards, this is going to become your planned hours, your planned estimate, planned budget. Everything that will happen from this point onward will become your actual hours, actual budget, actual work, actual effort, and you will be comparing your planned versus the actual. So baseline the budget, and from that point onwards, like I said, planned versus actual will be reported. The variances. Report monthly status. Plan what the senior management would like to see. Again, what details or what level of detail does your senior management like to see from reporting perspective? Would they want to drill down to only the milestones or the targets, or they want to see just the high level, just the phases, or they want to go into the details of it because you have an educated sponsor or you have an educated sponsor that has a very clear need for going into the details. But as project managers, you need to ensure that the project sponsor and your project organization doesn't start micromanaging your project. There's a simple line that you need to ensure that nobody crosses that line, because once that line is crossed, your accountability and your responsibility as a project manager is undermined. Remember, project managers are responsible for multiple things. Some being cost, your project profit, your project team's efficiency, your project expenses, the quality control, and so many more that cannot fit this particular slide and will go on to multiple other slides. At the end of the project planning process, your business executives decide if your project can or should target meeting specific business objectives. Again, this is the vision capability of your sponsors and your project organization. You as a project manager is only responsible for executing the tasks based on the scope or the requirement that was provided to you. So, whether you should proceed on with your project or not, at every phase is the decision of your sponsors and your project organization. And that should be clarified within your sponsor agreement management plan. "65% of projects being troubled or failed." And we are here saying that if you spend enough time in the project planning phase, you are setting yourself up for success. So within the planning phase, if you're spending, as a project manager, if we are spending 60% of our time on the project, then what are we supposed to deliver? And what are the things that if we do not deliver will cause our project, or set it up, instead of setting it up for success, set it up for failure? So let's look at some of the things that can go wrong within the planning phase and cause our projects to be troubled. Number one, and the most important one, is failure to set and manage customers' expectations. The whole conversation about keeping your customers at a hand's distance, understanding, doing a sponsor agreement management, making sure that the success of your project is on the top priority list of your project sponsor, all comes out in this little bullet. During the planning phase, you have to ensure that you grab the attention of the project sponsor and your project customer to ensure successful delivery of your project. Customer is unprepared to take on project responsibilities. If in the planning phase you decide and you're seeing or you're getting indications that your customer is unprepared to take on project responsibilities, then that should really turn on the red signal. That should be your antenna suggesting something needs to be done right now. Lack of common understanding of requirements. There's no level set. Customers expecting something totally different. You are actually going in some on tangent, delivering something totally different, and there is no agreement. Remember that last phase, commitments of the stakeholders, relevant stakeholders, where you saw all happy faces? If those faces are not happy faces and are frowning faces, then that's an issue right now, that there is lack of common understanding of requirements. Poor quality proposals, undocumented, poor quality, vague statements, adjectives not being used correctly, for example, will give you too many, or will ensure timely delivery. Promising moons and the stars to the customers without being very relevant and very specific about your requirements upfront. Those will lead to not just trouble, to failed projects. Lack of information in the charter. Unclear organization roles and responsibilities. When you don't have organizational roles and responsibilities as part of your charter, and very clear understanding of who will sign the documents, who will help me in the need of an hour of need, who will come to my assistance, who will be seeing the status report, who will be attending my meetings, who will be leading and chairing the change control board, who will be signing off on the changes. If you don't have those roles and responsibilities clearly laid out in the initial or the planning phases of the project, your project again is leading to the road of troubled or failed. And then failure to plan and project risks. Failure to plan and manage project risks. Remember that bubble, the identification of risks? Risks need to be identified. Risks need to be managed. Between the identification and managing, you have to come up with mitigation plans for if these risks happen, what do I do? We will dedicate a whole lecture on, and maybe a couple of lectures on project risk management. The lack of defined quality control mechanisms. Again, from risk we are moving on to the project quality management area. If you don't have defined quality control processes, you're also setting yourself up for trouble. And last but not the least is inaccurate and uncommitted project estimates. From what we have discussed and what we have seen, a lot of those important bubbles, a lot of that conversation revolved around responsibility and accountability. Happy stakeholders, committed stakeholders, people understanding the need and the commitment that they're making of delivering something on time within budget, and people up there ready to sign off on and pushing your project in the right direction if you are consistently meeting your targets. So whenever there are changes to the project, it will be dealt in a fairly organized manner to ensure the success of your project. Project planning phase is again, for a project manager, is a phase to delegate, support and coach. And last but not the least, make others accountable for the commitments and for the estimates that you have made on their behalf. The whole responsibility, accountability aspect of it is the essence of the project planning phase. Committed stakeholders, relevant stakeholders who are the sponsors, ensuring that you understand the definition of project sponsors, different methodologies adopting different processes. However, the work that gets out of it is the same. You need to have the process to establish budget, create a project plan, and then have a committed plan baselined to move on to execution and subsequent monitoring and control. That's all from me in this lecture. Hope you understand the importance of the planning phase. And in the next lecture, we will continue to talk about some of the project planning phase issues, and hopefully we will have a clear and similar understanding of what it's all about. Looking forward to the next lecture. Take care. Allah Hafiz.